Welcome to Slayer the Alchemist, and on today's episode, I want to discuss Judas Priest and their 1986 album, Turbo. I did a vinyl haul video, my last video, and I mentioned how I got this. I didn't have this on vinyl. I mentioned how I was disappointed that the record was really noisy and everything, so I'm still going to look for another better copy. If anybody's interested in this one, let me know. I'll hook you up for a good price. And in the comments of that vinyl haul video, a couple people commented on this record and were sort of expressing their opinions on it. And it's a real kind of love-hate record in the Judas Priest catalog. It's kind of a shift for them away from, you could say that the 80s at British Steel and Screaming for Vengeance were a shift away from their 70s sound. Well, here they're shifting away even from their 80s sound. And it gets very... the sound is different on this record than the records that came before it. And so it's a little bit of a divisive record. And for a lot of people, like myself included, I remember I got this when it came out and I kind of liked it, but it was kind of like the beginning of the end for me with Priest. And I would drift away from them and wouldn't really come back until Rob came back in the band. So it's an album that sparks a lot of conversation because I don't think it's a terrible record. But it's certainly not like their best record. So I thought it would be fun to do a list of what went right and what went wrong with Judas Priest Turbo. And I believe I have 5 things that, I'll get into it here. All right, so I'm going to start with what went wrong on the record. All right, number 1 for me, the drum machine. Now, I have my suspicions that even on Defenders of the Faith, that they started to use a drum machine. The drums don't sound very good on Defenders of the Faith. They're way far in the background. And I think it's the same thing that happened here, but even more so, where here they're using a drum machine, but at times they're using real drums for like drum fills, but like in the verses and stuff, that those are just drum machines. I've never read an interview where they say one way or the other, but to me it just sounds like a drum machine. I've been listening to this album quite a bit actually since I got it on vinyl. Fortunately, like I said, that record is really noisy, so I've just been listening to my CD copy of it. But the drum machine makes it kind of stiff, and again, again that complaint that a lot of people have with this is that it doesn't sound like classic 80s Priest. It certainly doesn't sound like classic 70s Priest, and I think the drum machine is a big part of that. So that's my number 1 with what went wrong with this record. Number 2 is the synths. Now, Iron Maiden was sort of starting to go through the same thing here with Somewhere in Time, where they were using guitar synths. It's like it almost made it like somewhat acceptable. It's like, yeah, it's a synth, but we're playing it with the guitar, so that makes it more okay. And I'm not sure what's going on here. I think it's guitar synths. I don't know if there's just regular like keyboards mixed in here, but there's a lot of synthesizer keyboard stuff on here. And that also really took it away from certainly the 70s Priest sound, but even the 80s Priest sound. It gave it a very kind of like modern sound. It sort of softened up the sound a lot, and a lot of people did not like that. Okay, next was song titles and lyrics. I'm going to read now. This is the band that gave us stuff like Beyond the Realms of Death and Dissonant Aggressor and Sin After Sin and The Ripper and Victim of Changes, and even if you want to get into the 80s stuff that gave us Screaming for Vengeance and Metal Gods. And here we're getting lyrics like, in the cities of the world, every boy and girl go crazy to the beat of rock and roll. That's from Rock You All Around the World. Or how about, I'm going to break out, I'm going to drive my car. From Wild Nights, Hot and Crazy Days. You say I waste my life away, but I live it to the full. How would you know anyways? You're just Mr. Dull. That's from Parental Guidance. So the lyrics definitely went in a very poppy direction. And you could say there's a step, and I'm not going to argue with this, that there's a step down in the lyrics from the 70s to the 80s, but this just really drops down into Twisted Sister, Kitty, grade school land. All right, number 4 that went wrong here is just in general, this sort of ties in with the lyrics. just sort of the pop songs, the melodic songs. Now, and when I was researching this, I went to Wikipedia, and it actually lists this record as style. It says the style of the record is glam metal dash heavy metal. So it lists glam metal first. So that kind of says it, that this album had this sort of pop glam metal side to it that I think really turned off a lot of Priest fans. Songs like Parental Guidance, even though I kind of like Parental Guidance, it's sort of a guilty pleasure. I like really melodic rock type songs, Since You've Been Gone, you know, songs like that. So Parental Guidance, the lyrics are really, really stupid, almost embarrassing. You know, these guys at their age, and they're singing like they're, you know, angsty teenagers in their bedroom or something, angry at their parents. You just don't understand, you know, type of thing. So it's kind of embarrassing, but I think it's a fun song, and it kind of reminds me of this era, 86, when this was a thing, you know. It was kind of like fun rock and roll. The glam bands and the LA bands were at full power at this point. It was all about kind of partying and having fun. So, you know, and us against the world, you know, parents just don't understand. It's a Parental Guidance reminds me of that, but still, it's a very, very sort of melodic, poppy, glammy song. Rock You All Around the World. I mean, my gosh, that just sounds like a straight up mid-80s Scorpions song title. Wild Nights, Hot and Crazy Days. That sounds, isn't there a Kiss song that's called something like Crazy Days or Hot Nights? I mean, that sounds like a late 80s Kiss song title. So they were definitely going for this kind of what was popular at the time. So it kind of felt like they were selling out, like with the lyrics and with these pop songs and everything. Okay, number 5 for me for what went wrong with Turbo. This wasn't too terrible, but their look. They started puffing up their hair. They started wearing, it was still wearing like the leather. So I'll try to insert a picture if I can find one from that era. But, you know, the brighter colors, the hair and everything, and it just felt like, again, they were trying to sort of get in on this, the glam, the pop metal, the radio metal, and everything that was happening at the time. Okay, let's get into what went right for this record. I've got 5 things that went right. So 5 that went wrong, and I've got 5 that went right. The production by Tom Allom. I actually think this is a really, really well-produced record. Sonically, like when I was listening to the vinyl, even though it was noisy, Turbo, the song Turbo Lover, man, there was just this great bottom end, man. And I don't know if that's the synths and the electric bass or a combination of both. But it just has a great warm sound to this record. There's kind of a lot of things going on with the vocals, and I just think it's a really well-produced record. Now, if you take out of the equation, if you don't like the drum machines and you don't like the synths, but outside of that, just sonically, I think it's a really well-produced record. Now, number 2 for me is one that was the negative. I had the synths as a negative, but I'm also going to put it as something that went right here. I actually find this kind of interesting, the way they were starting to incorporate synths and at that time what was modern sounds into the Judas Priest sound. And maybe this is because before I got this on vinyl and started revisiting this record, I was been listening a lot to Rob Halford's Voyeurs album. He called the band Two, and the name of the record was Voyeurs. If you've never heard this record, it was produced by Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails, and it has a very industrial sound to it. And I was planning on making a video on that, and I still will do at some point in the future. So, and I've mentioned this before, that in the last so many years, I like keyboards, dark wave and stuff like that. And so I find it kind of interesting, actually, the way the keyboards were used in some of these songs. Like, for instance, in the Turbo Lover, I think it's really cool the way the keyboards are in there. Private Property has some cool keyboard stuff in there towards the end. Out in the Cold, Hot for Love. I just think it's kind of cool the way that they used the keyboards. And I wouldn't have had a problem if they had continued to maybe try to incorporate these into the sound of the band. Maybe just bring in a keyboard player to make it a little bit even more interesting. Like at times it just sounds like it's I don't know, just sort of single notes and little things here and there. Maybe if they had just brought in a keyboard player altogether, it would have made the whole thing more interesting. All right, number 3, what went right for this record? You could say I'm reaching for things at this point, but the videos. I thought that the videos they had for this album were fun. And they got played like crazy on MTV. Like if you did the video for Turbo Lover, I think is really cool. And the video for Locked In, I remember that getting played like crazy. And it's a little silly, but it's fun. You know, I thought it was a fun video with the skeletons and everything like that. So they got a lot of MTV video play for this record. Number 4 for me, the songs. So I put some of the songs that didn't work on this album for me. Well, the songs that do work for me are, for instance, Turbo Lover. I love that song. I think that's a great song, and it's a perfect example of what I was talking about with the synthesizers, that I love the way the synthesizers are used in Turbo Lover. In fact, I even like the drum machine type sound in that song. I think it's really cool, and it adds to it, and it kind of makes me wish they had explored that a little bit more. And even though the lyrics aren't your typical screaming for vengeance, you know, metal god type of lyrics, I think that they're pretty cool and they're pretty interesting. I like Turbo Lover, the song. I think it's super catchy. I like the vibe of it and the mood of it. It has this robotic feel to it, this electronic feel, but it really works to the song. And I wish they had sort of explored. I think they got it right on that song, but they sort of get it wrong on some of the other ones. I think Locked In is a good song. It's fun. Yeah, it's kind of melodic. I don't really want to call that one glammy, but it's fun and it's cool. Private Property, that one's okay. The lyrics are kind of stupid, but it's okay. I don't hate that one. Out in the Cold is fantastic. Next to Turbo Lover, Out in the Cold is probably my other favorite song on this record. It's on the live record that they would do right after this. I just think that's a fantastic song, and another great example of them using the keyboards to good effect and using the more electronic sounds that they were embracing here to really good effect. I think that's a fantastic song. I could have put as an extra here too for what went right. Let's call this 4.5. Is the performances on here. I think Rob sounds great. He has some great vocal performances. I think that KK and Glenn Tipton sound really good. And there's even some really cool bass playing on here. Usually Ian Hill, you can't hear him, but there's some moments on here where his bass really jumps out. Hot for Love, I think is pretty cool. Not a great song title. Like, we get love in Turbo Lover, but turbo is a pretty cool metal sounding word. So Turbo Lover, it works there. Hot for Love, that's a really stupid song title, but I think the song's okay. And the last song on the album, Reckless, I think is pretty cool. So, you know, all said that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 I really like if I add Private Property in there. 6. Okay, and finally for number 5, I'm going to say what went right for this record was the success of this record. I was surprised to learn this, that this is their highest charting album. Came in at number 17 until Angel of Retribution came out. But I'm going to discount Angel of Retribution because that was after the Napster era, and it didn't take a lot to break into the top 20, you know, at that point. But at this time, it was hard to get a record this high up in the charts. And so for them to get all the way up to number 17, it was their highest charting record at the time. It went platinum for them. So it was a big selling record. So the negatives and the positives of this record, you know, the thing about Priest is that it's not like they never flirted with this type of melodic stuff before. Like on Point of Entry, there's a lot of melodic stuff on there. And there seems to be this side of Judas Priest that they want to embrace this. You know, this is part of them. They have this melodic rock pop side inside them. And then they do these records. They get sort of, you know, I would say that history has written Turbo as a bit of a flop, but at the time it really wasn't. Like I said, it went platinum up to number 17. The videos got played like crazy, but history hasn't been so kind to Turbo. Point of Entry, that one pretty much was viewed as not a great album from the beginning. But yeah, so this album's just a real kind of mixed bag. You got some really cool things on it, got some things that don't work. You know, you sort of wonder if they had gone in this direction, and the song Turbo Lover and more things like that, could they have shifted the direction of the band? I don't know, maybe not. Let me know what you guys think of Turbo down in the comments below. Let me know what you think about my what went right, what went wrong. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. Watch out for my video of the Turbo, the best of Turbo, or making a better Turbo, or something I'm going to call it, where I'm going to combine Ram It Down and Turbo to make one really great album. I think I'm going to release those right at the same time if I can. All right, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Till we see you again, make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.